think I'm live. All right, friends and family, creatives, artists, actors. We're just a few minutes before 7 o'clock here on Tuesday at 7. And this is the last Tuesday in August. Obviously, you know that we're going into Labor Day weekend, and so this is going to be the last week for the Improv series that I just threw out there. It's called Improv for Life. I hope that you guys have signed on and found some useful information out there. I see that folks are signing on now. Thank you. The month of August, again, was our month of going over improv. And we talked about the very first time, or I talked about the very first time that I experienced improv. And then the three stages that I used to kind of teach improv and that I used to kind of coach myself through how to do that well. We talked about how improv, I believe, can set you up in an unfair advantage. I think in the real world, if you're doing some type of character and you're working a hunt character or a medieval fantasy fair character or a mime or some other type of improvisational character, being able to improv well sets you apart from everybody else. But I think if I were to wind back into the reason that I decided to do this series was, first of all, it was requested, but I think most importantly what I'm trying to do is just kind of share forth some experience that I've had. But I feel that the experience I had as an improv character put me at an unfair advantage in real life in terms of interviewing for jobs, maybe connecting with folks, starting a business. My wife and I own our own business, and so I think that learning the tenets of improv put me at an advantage. And so what I'm trying to do is just share it forward and provide you that same advantage if you're interested. I said in the other weeks that I think that as I take a look back each week, we see that there's several hundred, maybe 400 people view this each week. This is just within a week's period of time. But that of the several hundred people that watch, I think there's a percentage, I would guess 10%, that maybe kind of lean in and say, well, maybe I should listen, because maybe there's a few things here, a few nuggets of value that maybe I can apply to my life. And so if you're one of those 10%, I'm glad that you might be finding some of this useful. If you're not and you just like to jump on and listen to this and maybe feel some inspiration or motivation, I'm glad that you joined us too. But we are, according to my watch, I'm assuming it's right, we're just a few seconds away from 7 o'clock, and I like to start promptly for those folks who are signing on. But we talked about the first week again, where I first experienced it and what drew me in, what the hook was. So if you were to review back and go to the very first week, I think I called it In the Beginning, that was the story of what connected me, and then where I found myself involved in improv acting, most notably for hunts, and had a chance to work next to many talented people, learn from their experience, kind of to maybe extract and distill down that information into a teachable model, because improv acting is an art, it's not a science, but there was a demand for teaching it, and so I kind of created a model for that. And that's what I've been talking about the last few weeks. The second week, which was the first step, and it was stage. The second week was go, and then this week is going to be engage. So it was stage, go, and engage. And today we're talking about the last one, which is engage. And engage, I think, is where the greatness, the very last step, this is where the greatness exists. And it's also the most difficult, who would think. But as we talked about stage, so I'm just going to give 10 seconds stage. Stage is where you create your character, whether it's an improv character or you're creating a character, your own personal character. Maybe you're owning a business and you're creating, kind of the business profile. And you're placing it on stage, right? Because all the world's the stage and everybody's looking in the world of social media. Folks are watching. If you're selling coffee or open an art gallery, there's a feeling behind your business. So there's a stage. we talked about traditional theater, and I think if you just stay on stage and all you do is present yourself, and then you're kind of a traditional theater type person. But in improvisation, we just don't present to a stage. We break that fourth wall, and we go to our audience. And so to improv, that second step is very necessary, and that's the go. We talked about that last week. If you click back after this is over, back to go, you get into those details. But then today is engage. Again, stage, go, engage. Engage is where the greatness occurs. It's the most difficult, and we're going to cover that here just really quickly in 10 minutes. You'll get the overall aspect of it in terms of trying to master it and go after that yourself. That's going to take some practice, and that's I'm sure that you already know that. So stage, go. So let's talk about going, right? And so if we break the fourth wall, we're going to our audience. That's necessary in improv. But where the greatness occurs, the engage, is when you go to your audience, you're going to say something, you're going to do something, you're going to go in some form or fashion. And the necessary piece, and this is the piece that's really easy to miss, is that when you go to your audience, you've got to pause, and you've got to look and listen. So as you go to your audience, you pause and you look and you listen, and that has to be intentional. I think a lot of folks, the tendency, and I think the reflex is to go and to continue, just power through whatever it is you're delivering. If you're a salesperson and you're going to your customer or potential customer and you start to ramble, if you go and you don't stop and look and listen, there's no way to improv. You're just spewing, and I think that's where a lot of mistakes happen. So in improv, you go and you pause and you look and you listen. Without that, you'll never learn to improv well. But when you go and you look and listen, you have to watch what your audience is doing, you watch what your customer is doing, you watch what the interviewer is doing, and when you look and listen, your audience will cue, or your relationship will cue that next behavior of yours, of ours. That next word, that next gesture, that next movement. So you look, listen, let your customer cue that next move, and then go to that next piece as an actor, as a person, as a character. This is, and we talked about it the other weeks too, and that is, if you're creating a improv character and you're building that, we talked about kind of that character sheet. If you're building that, then you already have a backstory, you already have a look, and so you're prepared because you've created that backstory and you put your character up on stage. You're prepared for common reactions. And so improv is very much rehearsed. We talked, those common reactions are rehearsed at any rate. I hooked up and connected a couple, actually there's just one link to Whose Line Is It Anyways? I think most of us know that, at least if you're over 30. Whose Line Is It Anyways are 4 comedians, and I'm not a comedian. We're not talking about comic improv. We're just talking about improv for life. But those comedians get up on stage and they ask for the audience to throw out words or things like that. They maybe tossed a music style, a country music or hip-hop or something else. They might be asked to sing in the style of Prince or Michael Jackson or something else. But as a watcher, or as somebody who watches those comedians, I think you often think, well, they've got to be, that can't really be complete improv. They can't really be that good. That has to be planted, and they have got to rehearse that ahead of time. And I'd say that is accurate. They rehearse commonly used or commonly expected reactions, and that's what we're talking about here too. They rehearse country. They rehearse hip-hop. They rehearse the common things. But what they don't know is when that audience might throw out a keyword and say, you're a lunch lady, or sing a song about somebody who's a jazzercise, whatever. And then they get those unexpected aspects that get thrown into kind of that rehearsed, the rehearsed area. So when you prepare for improv, you go, you pause, you look and listen, and then you let that next your audience behavior cue that next line, right, or that next behavior. When you look and listen, you're going to see that the audience often behaves in the same way, and so you'll learn it's very quickly that you are able to rehearse your improv. But just like on Whose Line Is It Anyways, or just like real life, just like preparing for the 10 most commonly asked questions at an interview, that you're going to get the unexpected thrown at you, right? So improv is preparing for the expected, but it's also to prepare for the unexpected. You prepare for the unexpected by looking and listening, by building your character, and creating your backstory, and this is what I want to share, and this is the history of the character, this is the look, the movement, the props, the whatever. Whether you're staging your own personal character, whether you're staging your business, whether you're staging your sales force, whether you're staging a Disney character down at one of the Disney parks, whether you're staging your hunt character or your clown or whatever, by creating that backstory and preparing for it on the front end, you are prepared to respond to the unexpected on the back end. And so with that, again, we're just powering through these last couple items here, wrapping up the series on Improv for Life. So stage, go, engage. When you prepare for the expected, and if you don't do the work, you're not going to reap the benefits. So do the work, create the character sheets. Remember, you can contact me at my email, rogerichabod@aol.com. That's ROGERICHABOD @AOL.com. And thank you for those people who have contacted me. And feel free to just throw out some questions, some ideas. I'll also send you a character sheet if that's what you're looking for. But if you prepare for it and you do the work, then you will reap the benefits. What I believe, and if you remember from the very first week, we're going to kind of wrap back up here and that. If you talked about Booger the very first week, Booger was a hunt character that kind of hooked me in. If you've gone back to that story, there was 4 of us that went to a hunt. It was a large queue line, and Booger was an improvisational character planted there to engage this large group of customers waiting to get into the hunt. Hundreds of them, 400 or 500. During that time, he was staging his character. At times, because he was an improv character, he would go to the audience, and if you remember for this story, he was animated, and he was creating all kinds of commotion to the 300, 400, 500 people in line. And if you remember from the first week, Amy held out a tissue. Now Booger had a stream of tissue, and at the right moment, he pulled out a prop, but it was a very large-looking booger out of his nose. But Amy, who was the jumpy one in our group, handed or waved the tissue. And Booger paused, and he looked, and he listened. And when he saw that tissue, he just didn't power through, but he attended to the fact that it was being offered. And what he did is he went, and it was over the shoulder, and Booger grabbed it. So he grabbed that, used it as a prop. If you remember, he kind of turned around, put it on the outside of his costume, but between his butt cheeks, and he went back into the queue line, right? Hundreds of people. And he continued to act, and he turned, and he came to us again. He came to us, scared Amy, who left the queue line, took the tissue, wiped at his nose. Again, a bunch of makeup powders. It was dirty. He crumbled it up, and then he just took it and he threw it into the queue line. And so that was the beginning that connected with me. But if you take a look at what we've talked about, the stage, the go, the engage, and if you think about that story, the story of Booger, handed the tissue, he looked, he listened, he grabbed it, he involved it in his act, went back to the queue line, went ahead and involved the queue line as a whole, brought it back, used it again with Amy, turned, and then you went back to the queue line and used that as a prop for one more engagement with the audience. 400 or 500 people scattered, had fun, talked about it for quite some time, and that was back in the late, I guess it was 89, maybe 90, if I had to recollect. And if you think about it, we're talking 27, 28 years ago, and so that striking character and that striking interaction burned itself in my memory. And so what I was just trying to do is franchise that idea, try to come up with a way to engage others in a similar fashion. And so that was my intention over the past 4 weeks to share with you. Again, if you have any questions, comments, send them to me. You can go ahead and comment right here on Facebook. I'll be happy to answer those for you. But just to the very last thing, and I'll wait in case there's a couple questions. I can't just scroll back and see if there's any big questions asked, but I'll get some questions here in just a moment if there are any. But I wanted to end with this, and that is the improv folks, the folks that prepare well can interview and get jobs quicker. They're folks that I think do well as pillars in the community, as leaders in their family, as actors at haunts. Whatever the case may be, improv is going to put you at an advantage. But as we talked about the stage, the go, and the engage, what happens is those folks who start to do it well start to become really good at it. That's why those comedians on Whose Line Is It Anyways are really amazing to watch. It's also the reason why people who improv well engage people around. They make more money. They're more entertaining if you're watching them. But when you improv well, stage, go, engage, and you're engaging well, that engagement can be long. It could be several minutes. It could be 10 minutes, 20 minutes if you want. That engagement can be not only over minutes, but be over, even if it's electronic, can be over days, months, years. But once you do that, what I would say is at that point, and the title that I typed out is, what was it? I forgot what I wrote down, but it's time for the engagement rings. And so improv folks, once they start to engage well, what they do is they realize that they're creating an engagement ring, whether it's a person, whether it's a business, whether it's a character. And by doing certain things, if you're in person, if you set your character up right and you mic yourself, and you can increase your engagement ring. Instead of just the 25 people who are right next to you, perhaps being elevated up onto a stage, being mic'd, can set your engagement ring to maybe several hundred, maybe several thousand people simultaneously. If you're getting on Facebook, you can increase your engagement ring by maybe a few hundred people that watch it in a week. Maybe it goes elsewhere and gives the opportunity to increase your engagement ring. But the engagement ring is, I think, the ultimate direction, the ultimate place to get to. When you're there, you'll know it. It's just like sports. That it's kind of, you get in the zone. You get into this engagement zone or this engagement ring, and you realize that you can create this large engagement ring. And if you do it along with others, you can create engagement rings that over or intersect and can engage a large crowd. If you're doing it with business, you create engagement rings so that you kind of overlap and cover customers or cover different spaces, different areas of not only community but perhaps even of the world. So with that, I'm gonna take a couple questions if there are any, and I'm gonna lean in here because I can't see without my glasses. I don't have my contacts in. If there are any, go ahead and shoot them out. And if you find, I think if you look down in this area here, there's a share button there. You could share it out to everybody if you'd like. If you want to share it out, you can just share it out and you can kind of Skype it to just one or two people on your friends list. I think this is probably pertinent to folks in their college years. I think they spend a lot of money on education or they train for a job, and then they're kind of sent out into the world to go, oh yeah, go ahead and put together a resume, try to get a job, post your application out on the internet, but then you finally win that interview, and if you prepare well, you get the job. So if this applies to somebody on your list, or somebody who may be in the entertainment area, or just somebody who you think these improv skills would be of value, snipe it to them. Just share it to them, or share it to 2 or 3, or share it to your whole book. It's whatever you see fit. And thank you for spending your time. I know your time is valuable. I appreciate that. And so we've just wrapped up. I'm going to lean in here. If there's any questions, I'll wait for just a couple minutes. But with that, we've just wrapped up this improv series. If you remember from last year, that the month of September is special effects month. And so starting next Tuesday, that's a Tuesday after Labor Day, we're going into special effects. And we're going to be live demoing some things. First couple of weeks, I think we're going to do something simple. Last year, we did gelatin and we did latex and some other things. We're not going to necessarily repeat those. Maybe there's a demand for it. And let me see what I got here. Yeah, and yeah, that'd be great. To tag whoever you want to. But in terms of the effects, it's going to be quick. It's going to be next week. Is going to be a shorter one. It's going to be something that's maybe a shorter demo, something that somebody who has no experience can succeed in. And if you have experience, I think you'll learn some valuable stuff. So next Tuesday, we're doing special effects. We will have somebody here that we'll be demoing on. I'll make an announcement before Tuesday. If you're interested, I'll just make an announcement to tell you who's going to be joining us and then what the effect will be. And then you guys can kind of dig in. I know there's a lot of stuff going on in October. There's a lot of interest in effects and painting, and so we're going to cover that as well. Thank you all for joining. Barb, my cousin Barb, and Steve. Steve is joining me. He's our live studio audience. Big Steve. What I'm going to do is, Steve's here. Right? Hey, all right. So Steve's a good friend of mine. He also is a radio personality, right? On Karma, KRMA radio. Joining me. Yeah, and we are going to go grab a pizza here. So, guys, have a great week. Hopefully this improv is something that you'll find is valuable to your life. Again, feel free to contact me via email. It'll take me a couple days maybe to get back. But share it forward. And have a great week. We'll see you next week doing FX. All right. Take care.